Rob Stewart was first and foremost a conservationist. He felt drawn to the sea, and through film he was able to educate people about the plight of our oceans. He became an award-winning filmmaker after he directed the documentary Sharkwater, a program chronicling the extent of illegal shark fishing, largely driven by the demand for shark fin soup in Asia. He made people aware that sharks are on the verge of extinction. As a result of the successful documentary, 90 countries banned catching sharks for finning. It was considered a huge success for conservation, and Rob was seen as a local hero. But in January 2017, tragedy struck when Rob was filming Sharkwater Extinction, the sequel to Sharkwater. Rob was an experienced scuba diver. He had over 10,000 scuba dives under his belt and a whole suite of diving certificates to his name. But on this particular dive, something was different, and something went wrong, disastrously wrong. He was diving the shipwreck Queen of Nassau, a deep dive site off the coast of Florida. The ship was built in 1904 under the name Canadian Government Ship Canada. With its hull built from steel instead of wood, it became one of Canada's fastest ships in the Fisheries Protection Fleet and its first naval training ship. It is the site of archaeological investigations and provides a haven for marine wildlife. Because of its depth, it is considered a technical dive. It is one of the least dived wrecks, but is in remarkable condition. Her mast has been broken and there is damage to her stern, but aside from that, she lies relatively untouched in the deep water. It is cold diving to those depths, and it's recommended that divers wear a dry suit and a hood. The sediment that has settled on the lower decks has a tendency to stir up in clouds as the currents wash over the wreck. This can hinder visibility, something that divers need to be aware of when preparing for the dive. But those that take on the technical dive will be rewarded with breathtaking marine wildlife and a well-preserved wreck. Sponges, oysters, and coral cling to the hull. Snappers, grouper, amberjack, and sharks frequent the site. It would be a marine filmmaker's paradise, full of interesting angles and dynamics from which to shoot a range of shots. On January 31, 2017, Rob climbed aboard a dive boat named Pisces. On board was a small team. The boat's captain, David Wilkerson, friend and collaborator, Brock Cahill, dive instructor, Peter Sotis, Peter's wife, Claudia, who was a doctor, and 37-year-old Rob. They left the shore of Isla Madora, south of Florida's Key Largo, and motored out to the wreck site. The purpose of the dive was to find the elusive sawfish. These incredible fish are a family of rays that can grow to over 7 meters or 25 feet long. Their characteristic feature is the elongated mouth with its teeth sticking out sideways, resembling a chainsaw. They are listed as endangered or critically endangered on the CITES list, as they have been hunted and overfished for hundreds of years. Their dwindling numbers are largely due to the demand for shark fin soup and their use in traditional Asian medicine. These were points that Rob wanted to focus on in his documentary. Rob had heard reports from other divers that sawfish swam through the wreck on occasion. Capturing these rare rays on camera would make for good footage for his new Sharkwater Extinction documentary. But things were about to go badly wrong. Ever since he was a child, Rob was enthusiastic about the water. He loved snorkeling and would always be the first in the water on holiday with his family. When he was just 13 years old, he convinced the family that they should all get scuba diving certificates so they could explore the underwater world together. He developed his interest and skills as an underwater photographer as soon as he learned how to scuba dive. By the age of 18, he had become a scuba diving instructor. He combined his passion for wildlife with his passion for diving, and later became an incredible marine filmmaker. His fascination with nature also began when he was very young. His menagerie grew year on year and included a collection of fish, snakes, and even a marine iguana. His childhood interests continued into adulthood. At university, whilst his mates were talking about sports and parties, Rob was talking about conservation and the plight of our oceans. He couldn't believe that nobody was doing anything about it. He took it upon himself to change the world we live in. He became a passionate conservationist, having gained his bachelor's degree in biology and studied zoology and marine biology in Kenya and Jamaica. At the age of 22, when visiting the Galapagos, he became aware of the illegal longline fishing going on there. He decided to make the documentary Sharkwater after that. and spent 4 years traveling around the world and researching the demise of sharks in our oceans. During his investigations to make the multi-award-winning documentary, he went undercover in the shark fin industry, something his parents worried about. But the documentary was a huge hit, and it was the start of a very successful filmmaking career for the young Canadian. Although he was an experienced diver, he had never dived as deep as the Queen of Nassau wreck. What's more, he was using equipment that was new to him. Called a rebreather, the technical equipment reuses the air exhaled by a diver and pumps it back into the tubes where oxygen is added. The benefit of using a rebreather rather than conventional scuba tanks is that you can dive down deeper for longer, and it doesn't release bubbles which can scare away wildlife, in this case the elusive sawfish. There are, however, disadvantages to using rebreathers, and most of these are concerned with the dangers of a malfunction, which apparently happen all too often. Because the gas supplied is in a closed-circuit system, with carbon dioxide breathed out removed from the mixture and extra oxygen added, there is a lot that can go wrong. Too little oxygen added will inhibit breathing, too much can lead to convulsions, and carbon dioxide buildup can be toxic. The incorrect mixture of gases available to a diver may not be noticeable until the diver loses consciousness. This can lead to a very serious situation and is a reason why only well-trained individuals should use rebreathers. Additional technology, such as a series of alarms and electronic equipment to monitor and control the gas mixture, can be used to reduce the risks. Rob had chosen Peter Sotis as his diving instructor and dive buddy. Peter owned a shop which specialized in rebreathers, and he prided himself in the ability to take clients deeper than they had ever gone before. But Peter was a shady character. He had a checkered past, and perhaps he wasn't someone you want to trust your life with. In 1991, he had been jailed for armed robbery, and more recently, just weeks before Rob's dive, he had been in legal trouble again. This time, the claims against him were more concerning. Peter was accused of buying scuba tanks that weren't compliant with U.S. safety regulations, relabeling them, and selling them on. This was a very serious allegation, and one which, if proven true, could be responsible for catastrophic diving incidents. He had also been accused of selling military-grade diving equipment to Libya. It is not known if Rob knew about Peter's past when he hired him, but it is unlikely he would have taken the risk. Peter wasn't the only one holding on to secrets. Rob, despite being an experienced diver, was prone to blackouts. It had happened before, but he so desperately wanted to make the dive and film the sawfish that he failed to mention it on the medical and safety questionnaires he completed before the dive. When Rob and Peter entered the water, those on the boat watched as the two men sank below. They descended to the wreck and glided over its decks, searching for sawfish. A dive of 200 feet or more is no mean feat, and for Rob, it was one of his first dives using a rebreather. Some describe using the apparatus as technically challenging and like learning to dive again. So taking essentially a first-timer to such a deep and technical dive site was foolhardy. Furthermore, even the most experienced of divers would perform such a dive only once in a single day. But when Rob and Peter resurfaced after the first dive, they decided to head down a second time. Rob was keen to secure a shot of a sawfish. They had come all this way to find them. He didn't want to leave empty-handed. And Peter was renowned for taking risks and pushing scuba diving to its limits. They performed a second dive. Although the conditions remained the same, descending to those depths twice in one day was dangerous. Experienced diver and expert in diving medicine Neil Pollack said that it was tempting fate. In hindsight, it turns out he was right. But for the two men, there was more to come. They resurfaced after the second dive, still with no luck of finding a sawfish. When they climbed into the boat, they realized that they had left a grappling hook at the bottom. It was attached to a long line and a buoy floating on the surface. Rob and Peter knew they had to go back down to retrieve it. They descended for the third time that day and grabbed the hook. When they reappeared on the surface at 5 p.m. that evening, Rob gave the OK signal to the boat crew, but Peter resurfaced in obvious distress. It had been foolhardy diving 3 times in a single day. Peter was overly confident in not only his own diving ability, but in his position as an instructor. He had made some serious errors in judgment and was now paying the price. He splashed about in the water as he made his way to the dive boat. When he climbed in, everything went black and he lost consciousness. The crew, including his wife who was a doctor, grabbed an oxygen cylinder and rushed to his side. Moments later, he came around and was sitting upright, apparently back to normal again within minutes. When everyone turned around to look at Rob, he had vanished. They motored the boat over to where he had last been seen and scanned the water, but he was gone. Maybe he had descended once more. Maybe he had spotted something in the water below him and gone to investigate. The crew bobbed around in the boat searching for Rob, but no one could find him. As the minutes ticked by, the feeling and sense of dread began to wash over them. What had happened to Rob? Where was he? Rob's parents, Brian and Sandra, were sat in a meeting in Toronto when they received a phone call from the U.S. Coast Guard. Hearing that Rob had gone missing, they hopped on a private plane and flew directly to Florida. An enormous search for Rob ensued, one of the biggest in the Coast Guard's history. Even billionaire Richard Branson loaned a plane to help with the search operation. Rescue divers from all over America joined in the search. Those who knew Rob couldn't imagine he had come to any harm. Although they knew deep down that that was the most likely scenario, it just didn't seem right. He was a fighter, he was a survivor, and he was one of the best scuba divers they knew. His parents had been worried about him when he had made his previous documentary, which had revealed illegal shark fishermen. Rob had been shot at and chased by fishermen whilst he filmed them. His parents worried that they would hunt him down and take him out for exposing their business. They never dreamed that he would meet his end during a dive, something he had been doing since the age of 13. It just didn't seem right. Tragically, 3 days later, expert divers found Rob's body on the seafloor, just meters from where he was last seen. A post-mortem examination found that the young man had passed away from hypoxia, or a lack of oxygen. This pointed towards a faulty rebreathing apparatus. However, the company who made the rebreather, Revo, flatly denied the equipment was at fault. Downloaded data from Rob's apparatus showed that he still had ample oxygen left. Could something else have caused the catastrophe? Neil Pollock, the expert in diving medicine who commented on the circumstances, said that both men suffering some kind of episode at the same time suggested decompression sickness. They had likely surfaced too quickly for whatever reason. Although it is understood that receiving oxygen after the bends, as it is also known, does improve symptoms, there are likely to be long-term symptoms that persist afterwards. In the case of Peter, these longer-term symptoms did not occur, which puts doubt on the theory of decompression sickness. The battle to find out not only what led to Rob's premature end, but also who was responsible, plagued Rob's family for years. Every online dive forum had a different opinion on the matter. Even medical professionals differed in the conclusions they drew. And the question that will always be running around Brian and Sandra's heads is, why was no one watching Rob when he resurfaced? He was literally within feet of the boat, and whilst everyone was tending to Peter, he somehow slipped beneath the waves, lost forever. The one thing that kept Brian and Sandra going was the video footage that Rob had shot over the past year. There were hundreds of hours of film that needed to be sorted through and condensed into a documentary that Rob would have been proud of. To help with the monumental task, Brian and Sandra contacted Nick Hector. He was an experienced editor who knew Rob. He was keen to get stuck into the project and to edit the film in the style that Rob would have approved of. Nick used the endless notes, emails, and diary entries that Rob had left behind to make the film. It was a painstaking task, but it was for Rob. When Nick showed the final cut to Rob's parents, it was a hugely emotional moment. They watched as their son's footage displayed the marine environment through Rob's eyes. It showed them the hard work he had put into the documentary to raise awareness about sharks and their journey towards extinction. It seemed everyone Rob came into contact with was sucked in by his charisma and passion for the marine environment. It helped Brian and Sandra deal with the loss of their son, or at least delay the grieving process. During the months of editing and trawling through the hours and hours of video footage, they were determined to make the film a success. They advertised and promoted the documentary as if it was their own. Posters adorned the streets, and teaser trailers enticed the general public. Their deadline was the Toronto International Film Festival, where it would premiere. They didn't plan to stop there either. Rob's mother and father aimed to visit other film festivals throughout Canada and the United States, just as Rob would have done. With all the footage they viewed during the editing process, it was like Rob was still alive. He used to send snippets of information home, telling his family what he was up to or what he had just filmed. Seeing his poster in the film's premiere, it was hard to comprehend that they would never see him in the flesh again. He had left such a hole in people's lives. Not only that, but he will be sorely missed by conservationists worldwide. The final scene of the documentary was heartbreaking. It showed Rob and Peter climbing onto the dive boat, Pisces, and motoring out to the side of the Queen of Nassau. Looking at the camera, Rob explains his diving equipment and how the rebreathing apparatus can help them dive deeper than they've ever gone before. His mission was to find a sawfish, a rare glimpse of the endangered animal that is often only seen by people in aquariums. He pulls on his diving gear and plunges into the water for the final time. The video fades to black, and Rob is never seen again. Thanks for watching this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on your notification bell to stay updated on more similar videos. We would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share your comments below. Until next time.